They say you never really know someone until you see them lie to your face. 3 weeks ago, I would have laughed that off, sure my wife Olivia and I were solid. We'd been together for years, raised 2 amazing kids, gone through the highs and lows, the tough patches and good times. And honestly, I thought we'd come out of all of it stronger. Then I made one phone call, and it shattered everything. It was a typical weekday, and I decided to surprise Olivia by meeting her for lunch. I called her office, figuring we could catch up on a few things. She picked up, but her tone was off, cold. She told me she couldn't meet, that she was busy with an important meeting. Nothing wrong with that, but something in her voice struck me as strange. So, I let it go. At least that's what I told myself. Instead, I dialed up an old friend of mine from college, Katie, who happened to work in the same building as Olivia. I figured if Olivia was really in a meeting, Katie would know, or at least she could tell me if she was free. Katie picked up on the first ring, and I casually mentioned Olivia's meeting. She paused before answering, as if she wasn't sure what to say. Olivia left the office about 40 minutes ago, Katie finally said. She went out with Gregory, her department head. That hit me like a punch to the gut. Olivia had told me she was preparing for a meeting, but now it was clear she had made up the whole thing. I thanked Katie and hung up, my mind racing. This wasn't adding up. She'd lied to me, and my gut told me that there was more to this than a harmless lunch with a coworker. I'd never been the jealous or suspicious type, but something pushed me to find out more. I opened an old tracking app on my phone, one I had installed years ago when the kids were younger and we kept tabs on each other for safety. I hadn't used it in ages, but their Olivia's location popped up immediately. She was in the middle of downtown, at a restaurant. And not just any restaurant, but a cozy, upscale place far from her usual lunch spots. I knew what I had to do. I grabbed my keys, left the office, and drove straight there, parking across the street. I felt my stomach twist with every passing minute as I watched the entrance. And then, right on cue, there she was, Olivia, stepping out of the restaurant with Gregory by her side. They were laughing, standing closer than just co-workers. As they turned to leave, his hand drifted to her back, a touch too familiar to ignore. And if that wasn't enough, they headed across the street, straight into a motel. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like watching a stranger in my wife's body, someone I didn't recognize. I had 2 choices: confront her right there or follow them and catch them in the act. My mind raced, but before I could think, I had already taken a shortcut and appeared right in front of them, as if I had just bumped into them by accident. Their faces went pale. Olivia froze, stammering nonsense about running into each other and talking work. She could barely meet my eyes. I stayed calm, my voice steady, and suggested we go back to the restaurant for lunch, the very place she'd just left with him. She stumbled over an excuse, but I kept my tone smooth, unbothered, until she gave in and agreed. She was stuck, cornered. We all got in the car together, the 3 of us, and I drove them back to her office, every second of the drive laced with tension she couldn't ignore. That night, I replayed the day over and over. There was no denying what I'd seen. My wife was hiding something huge, and she thought I'd just accept it. But that night, I promised myself I would find out every last detail, and that I would make her feel the same shock and betrayal she'd shown me. Over the next few days, I kept my cool and began piecing together every clue, every lie, every step she'd taken behind my back. If she wanted to play games, I was ready to go all in. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake what I had seen. But I kept my cool, waiting for the right moment, gathering the pieces I needed to make sure she didn't talk her way out of this one. I started watching her patterns more closely. Her excuses, her sudden work commitments that never seemed to end. My suspicion grew with each new lie, and so did my determination to see this through. Then, a week later, Olivia dropped another bomb. She had a work event on Friday night. One of those supposedly casual gatherings where everyone blows off steam after a long week. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but this time, when I casually suggested I come along, she froze. Her expression turned cold, almost dismissive, as she told me she wanted to go alone and not worry about keeping tabs on each other. It was laughable, the way she brushed me off, as if I had no reason to question her. But that icy reaction said everything I needed to know. She had no intention of going alone, and she certainly didn't want her husband tagging along. I kept my face neutral, nodding like I understood, like I was just the clueless husband who trusted her. "Sure, have a good time," I said, keeping my voice light, but inside, my mind was spinning. I knew exactly where she would be, and I wasn't going to sit back while she paraded around with Gregory behind my back. That's when I decided I'd turn the tables on her. I called Katie, my old friend from college, and she didn't hesitate to jump in, ready to keep an eye out for anything suspicious. That Friday night, Olivia left the house dressed to the nines, a level of effort she hadn't put into a night out with me in years. I watched her walk out, holding that oversized purse she took when she packed for more than just a few hours. She didn't say goodbye, didn't even look back, just walked out as if there were nothing unusual about it. As soon as she was gone, I called Katie. Within an hour, she confirmed what I already knew. Olivia wasn't at the office or the supposed work event location. She had skipped out early and was already at a bar downtown, one of those dimly lit spots where you could get lost in the crowd. I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and rage, knowing she was so careless, so obvious, thinking she'd gotten away with it. By the time I arrived, I stayed in the shadows, watching her and Gregory sitting close, laughing over drinks like two love-struck teenagers. I could feel every muscle tense as I watched them. His arm around her, her hand resting on his shoulder, both of them utterly oblivious. When they left the bar and headed to a nearby hotel, that was all I needed to see. I turned on my heel, heart pounding, and walked away, my plan solidifying with each step. She was going to feel the weight of every choice she'd made, and this night would be her last lie. When I got home, I went straight to our bedroom. I yanked open drawers, pulling out her clothes, shoving everything into suitcases, as if each item were a piece of our shattered life together. In the dark, empty house, it felt final, like I was packing away every lie, every broken promise. I filled 2 large suitcases, zipped them up, and set them by the front door, waiting. 10 p.m., she called. Predictable, almost rehearsed. She claimed she was still at the event and would be back late. I let her words float past, barely listening, not caring to respond. "Fine. Take your time," I replied, keeping my tone casual. Katie texted me around 11 o'clock, letting me know that Olivia had finally left the hotel. I sat in silence, waiting, my mind racing, replaying every excuse she had ever given me. By the time her car pulled into the driveway, I had become someone different, someone who wasn't about to forgive or forget. She walked in, freezing the second she saw me sitting on the couch, the packed suitcases by the door. I stayed silent, watching her face turn pale as she registered what was happening. What's going on?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Oh, just thought I'd help you pack," I said calmly, gesturing to the bags. "Looks like you have a new life to live, so why not get a head start?" Olivia's eyes went wide, darting between the bags and my face, her usual calm shattered. "Wait, what are you talking about?" she stammered, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Oh, you know exactly what I'm talking about." I leaned back, arms crossed, savoring the look of panic creeping across her face. "Or should I spell it out? The work event with Gregory, your little lunch meetings, and the cozy motel you two waltzed into tonight. Did I miss anything?" Her face flushed, then turned pale, her hands shaking as she tried to keep her composure. "That's not what it looks like. Really, it's—" she stuttered, scrambling for any lie that might stick. But this time there was no room for her stories. "I'd seen everything. Save it, Olivia. I don't want to hear another word." My voice was cold, and for the first time, I saw her realize she'd lost control of the narrative. I pointed to the bags by the door. "I packed everything you'll need. You can grab them on your way out." She tried to step closer, her eyes pleading. "Wait, can we talk? Please, you have it all wrong. It was just a mistake, a one-time thing." Her voice cracked, her eyes filling with tears. "It didn't mean anything, I swear." Didn't mean anything? I scoffed, anger bubbling up again. It meant enough for you to lie to my face, sneak around, and make me look like a fool. You can take your mistakes and go tell them to someone else. Her desperation turned to frustration, her tone shifting to anger. So that's it, huh? You're just throwing everything away over one night? You're being ridiculous. She crossed her arms, trying to regain control. I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter sound that filled the empty space between us. Ridiculous? You cheated, Olivia, and you were sloppy about it. And now you're upset that I'm not rolling over, acting like none of it happened. I shook my head. That's not how this works. For a moment, she just stood there, stunned into silence. Then, as if grasping at straws, she changed tactics. You know, this is all because you never paid attention to me, she hissed, her voice thick with resentment. You were so busy with work, with everything else. I felt like I didn't even exist to you anymore. I felt a flash of anger, but I kept my cool. That's funny because while I was working, you were planning secret dates with your boss. And by the way, I'm sure his wife would love to hear that excuse too. Funny thing, she already knows. That shut her up. She looked at me, horror flashing in her eyes. You told her? She whispered, disbelief and fear clear on her face. Oh yes, Brenda and I had a nice little chat. Turns out she's not a fan of her husband sneaking around either. She's already packing his things as we speak. Olivia's mouth opened and closed, her confidence shattered. For a moment, she just stared, the reality of what she'd done sinking in. She glanced toward the suitcases, defeated, but I could still see a hint of defiance in her eyes as she took a step back. So, this is how it ends? You really think you can just throw me out like some stranger? She spat, trying to muster one last shot at dignity. Yes, I said, voice cold. I do. Now take your bags, Olivia. And don't bother coming back. She hesitated, looking like she wanted to say more, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she grabbed the suitcases, casting one last, venomous glance over her shoulder before she walked out. The door clicked shut behind her, and the silence that followed was deafening. Felt final, like a weight lifted, like I could finally breathe again. For a long time, I just sat there, letting the quiet of the house settle in. The life we'd built, the trust one thought we had, it was all over. But as the reality sank in, I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was mine again. The house felt almost too quiet after she left, but I welcomed the silence. It was strange at first, being alone in the space we'd once shared. I went through our bedroom, collecting the last of her things, clearing out the pieces of a life that was no longer mine. I felt like I was erasing her from my world, one drawer at a time. But I knew I couldn't just sit in an empty house and pretend things were fine. So I started making a plan to move forward. A few days later, I got an unexpected message from Brenda, Gregory's wife. She asked if we could meet for coffee, and while part of me wanted to keep a distance from this whole mess, I couldn't deny the curiosity. We had been pulled into each other's lives without meaning to, and now it felt like I owed her at least a conversation. We met at a cafe, a neutral ground where we could both sit without the weight of our homes, our memories, surrounding us. Brenda was already there, stirring her coffee, looking calm and composed. When I sat down, she looked at me with a clarity in her eyes that surprised me. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her voice steady. "I just needed to talk to someone who understands. You know, someone who gets it." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "Believe me, I know how it feels to be blindsided." She took a sip of her coffee, watching me over the rim. "I left him," she said simply. "As soon as I heard from you, I told him to pack his things and get out. I should have done it years ago, but I guess I just needed a reason." Her words hit me hard. We had both been living with lies we hadn't wanted to see. "I get it. I guess you don't really see what's right in front of you until it hits you like that." Brenda leaned forward, her gaze fierce. "I just want him to understand what he's done. He's built his whole life on my family's connections, using people like they're disposable. He's not going to get away with it this time." I could feel the anger in her words, and I knew she was looking for justice, something I understood too well. It's a tough pill to swallow, I admitted, knowing they thought they could get away with it, like we'd never find out. She nodded, her expression hardening. Exactly. They thought they were so clever, sneaking around, thinking we were just clueless. But now it's their turn to feel what it's like to lose everything they took for granted. For a moment, we sat in silence, bonded by betrayal and a need for closure. There was something strangely satisfying about sharing this moment with Brenda, someone who had been as blindsided and hurt as I was. In a way, we both knew that this conversation was as much about letting go as it was about getting even. Do you think he'll ever get it? I asked, half to myself. She shook her head, a bitter smile on her lips. No. Men like him, women like your wife, they'll just find someone new to lie to. But at least we know the truth now. And maybe that's enough. We both finished our coffee, each of us a little lighter, as if we'd finally let go of the weight of secrets that had been forced on us. When we stood to leave, I felt a strange peace, a sense that I could finally move forward. As we left the cafe, Brenda turned to me one last time. If you ever need someone to talk to, you know where to find me. I nodded, grateful for the connection we'd found, even if it had come out of something so painful. Same to you, I replied. We've both got a fresh start. Let's make it count. We parted ways, each of us stepping into our own new beginnings, finally free from the lies we'd once called home. After meeting with Brenda, I felt a sense of closure, but I knew my daughters would have questions. I had kept them out of this mess as much as possible, but word travels fast, especially in family circles. Sure enough, a few days later, they showed up together at my house, looking serious and concerned. My older daughter, Sarah, was the first to speak. Dad, what happened? Mom says you threw her out over a work party. She looked at me, trying to piece together the truth from the fragments she'd heard. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. Look, there's no easy way to put this. Your mom wasn't at any work party. I caught her lying to me, sneaking around, and, well, she was with someone else. The words were bitter, but I knew they needed to hear it from me. They both went silent. Emma, my youngest, looked down, biting her lip as she processed everything. Sarah's face was harder to read, but I could tell she was struggling with a mix of emotions. After a long pause, Emma spoke softly. So it's really over, then? She sounded as if she was hoping I'd deny it, tell her everything was fine. I nodded, feeling the weight of it all settle in. Yeah, it's over. I wish it didn't have to be this way, but I can't pretend nothing happened. I can't stay married to someone I can't trust. Sarah crossed her arms, her face stern. Why didn't you tell us sooner? We could have helped, done something. There was nothing to do, I said gently. Your mom made her choices and I have to live with mine. This isn't easy for me either, believe me, but I'm doing what I have to do. They both nodded slowly, absorbing the reality of it. Emma sniffled, wiping a tear from her cheek. We're here for you, Dad. Just don't go through this alone. I managed a sad smile. Thank you. And don't worry about me. I'll be fine. I hugged them both, feeling the weight of their support, and for the first time, I could sense the healing process beginning. After they left, the silence in the house felt a little less heavy, a little more peaceful. I packed the rest of Olivia's things into boxes and sent them to her sister's place, wrapping up the last details of what had been our life together. It wasn't bitter, just a quiet ending, like the closing of a door. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I put my energy into work, reconnecting with old friends, and rediscovering the things I had put aside during our marriage. The weight of betrayal still lingered, but each day, it grew a little lighter. One afternoon, I received the official papers from my lawyer. The divorce was moving forward, and there was no turning back now. I felt a strange calm as I signed, as if I were finally free from a chapter that had long since lost its meaning. Olivia hadn't reached out, and I hadn't tried to contact her. Whatever words we might have exchanged felt unnecessary. The story was over, and in that quiet acceptance, I found a sense of peace. Months passed, and the initial sting of betrayal dulled into a faint ache. I'd settled into my new normal, filling my time with work and hobbies, rekindling friendships, and finding moments of peace in the quiet of my home. Each day without the drama and lies was a day I could reclaim for myself. The house was truly mine now, free from the tension that had once filled every corner. One evening, as I was putting away some old photo albums, there was a knock on the door. When I opened it, I found Olivia standing there, looking uncertain, almost nervous. She held an envelope in her hands, her face a mix of guilt and something close to regret. "Do you have a minute?" she asked, her voice softer than I remembered. I paused, weighing the moment. "What do you want, Olivia?" She looked down, taking a breath before speaking. "I just wanted to apologize. For everything." She swallowed, glancing at me as if to gauge my reaction. "I don't expect forgiveness, and I know I've messed up beyond repair. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry." I felt a strange sense of detachment as I listened. Maybe a few months ago this apology would have meant something, but now it just felt like closure. "It's too late, Olivia," I said, my voice calm. "You made your choices, and I've made mine." She nodded, accepting my words. "I understand. I guess I just needed to say it out loud." She handed me the envelope. "These are some old letters, photos, things I thought you might want back. I don't have any right to keep them." I took the envelope, feeling a bittersweet pang as I looked at it. "Thank you," I said, not out of kindness, but to signal that there was nothing left to say. She hesitated, as if hoping for some sign of forgiveness, but I just stood there, watching as she finally turned and walked away. The door clicked shut, and with it, any lingering hope of reconciliation closed as well. After she left, I sat down with the envelope, flipping through the photos and mementos of a life we'd once shared. There were snapshots of vacations, birthday cards, and letters we'd written to each other in the early years. For a moment, I felt the weight of all those years, the memories we'd built, the life we'd planned. But I didn't feel regret, only a sense of finality. I tucked the envelope away, setting it aside with a feeling of calm acceptance. I had my closure, my freedom, and a second chance to build a life without lies or compromise. In the months that followed, I threw myself into new projects, traveled, and found comfort in the steady rhythm of my own company. I wasn't in a rush to start over or find someone new. Instead, I focused on enjoying each day, reclaiming pieces of myself I'd lost along the way. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was a life I could finally live on my own terms. Looking back, I realized that sometimes the worst betrayals give way to the clearest paths forward. I had survived the heartbreak, the lies, and the loss. Now I was ready for whatever came next, stronger, wiser, and finally free.